and he'll tell us all we need to know about what's going on in the world of virology. Hello, Dr. Bharat.
Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon to everyone. They're all out there listening now, and they're thinking, oh, thank God Millsy's got an expert at last. Firstly, let me just deal with that. One of the problems in this pandemic and this year and the social media has been some people have been deliberately misleading because they've got political motives, but a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, isn't it?
It's very dangerous, especially where lives are concerned. And in the era of people being able to make really, really good media clips and make it look ever so authentic and then frighten the hell out of people. It's a shame, but something we need to become savvy about.
You see, for instance, and this is for instance, I read what somebody had written on my particular Twitter feed, which terrified me. And I thought the fact that these people are now sitting at home thinking this, because what they said was, oh my God, we just started to get COVID under control, and now we've got this whole new thing coming. Now, please set us straight on that.
Well, look, this is the natural biology of these viruses, especially the RNA viruses. When they duplicate, replicate, reproduce, whichever expression you want to use, they make mistakes. And as a result of making mistakes, we call them mutations, they sometimes change their configuration. So in this instance, we have a big change in configuration in the spike protein. It's still the coronavirus, it's still the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It's just that its lineage has changed a little bit. And the supposition is that as a result of its spike protein having a few mistakes, it appears to be more easy to infect human beings. In other words, it attaches a little bit better, a more slicker attachment to the ACE2 receptor on human cells, and therefore apparently easier to infect. We still need to find the real evidence that it is more infectious.
Well, exactly. Now, we've heard some figures of, I think, because of something that Dr. Eric Volzer said, Boris Johnson was using the figure 70%. But I would, if you read the article that's in, you only have to go 3 lines down to Professor Jonathan Ball to hear the amount of evidence in the public domain is woefully inadequate to draw strong or firm opinions on how much it's actually increased transmissions.
You're so right. And even I was flabbergasted to hear our leaders say 70% more infectious. I immediately said, how do you know? And how did you work this out? Because it would have taken me a long time to see the evidence in the field to then come and say, wow, it's not 60% more infectious, it's 70% plus. I think where they have gone wrong and lost the wood for the trees, so to say, is it might be in 70% of the cases, it is the new strain. In other words, predominantly 70% or more of the people have this strain. That doesn't translate to it is therefore 70% more infectious. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. You see, and by that logic, I could just as honestly say, oh, by the way, the old COVID vaccine, the old COVID that we had before this strain mutated, is now 70% less than it used to be.
You could argue that, indeed.
Because what's happened is it's just changed. It's not.
It's changed. I use the analogy of if somebody set up shop in the high street and started giving out coffee X. And before you knew it, everybody was drinking coffee X because it was readily available, readily used, readily accessible, etc. That doesn't necessarily mean coffee X is any better or any worse than the other coffees we used to have before.
Now, the other thing that is worrying people, Dr. Bharat, and please help us with this, is, but by the way, can I just say, in defense of the authorities, I believe that what they're doing is let's not under any circumstances undersell it. If we have to oversell it, let's do that, because people will stop being careful if they think it's getting less. So I think that's their reason for doing that. But tell us now about the vaccine. People are worried that this new mutation will find a way through the vaccine, and so the vaccines that we're being promised won't be effective.
Now, that's a very easy and an important question to answer. So when we develop the vaccines, be it the mRNA ones from Pfizer or Moderna, or the AstraZeneca Oxford one, what we do is we instruct our human cells to make the spike protein, the big thing that sticks out on top of the coronavirus. Now, if that spike protein is grossly changed, it's significantly different, it still doesn't matter, because we can refashion the vaccines to mirror the circulating strain of the spike protein. So what I have to say to our listeners and viewers is the vaccines will work for strain A, strain B, or strain C. Not to worry about that. And the good thing about the new variants of them is at least that they are not more severe disease causing. That's also something positive to acknowledge.
Well, that's excellent news. And my understanding as well, having been a flu jab taker for about the last 5 or 6 years, since I reached a certain age, they're continually changing. The flu jab I got 2 months ago is not the same flu jab I had 5 years ago, is it?
No, indeed. So with the flu, it is slightly different, but it's a similar analogy whereby whatever is circulating in the southern hemisphere during our summer, we formulate that to be given to us in our winter for our flu season. And it is the different proteins that the influenza virus expresses in the southern hemisphere's winter.
As a virologist, as a senior clinical lecturer, the battle here, what is the end game here? Because I'm guessing the end game isn't to completely wipe out. Surely the end game is to get it manageable to a point where it becomes just another strain of the flu, and the vaccine people then go on to upping their game every year to deal with it.
So there are several end game scenarios, and one of the best ones, and I doubt if that will happen, is to wipe it out. That's difficult. So we immunize a sufficient number of people globally, not only in our country, but globally, so that it becomes a minor infection causing outbreak whenever it catches the unimmunized or under-immunized people. Then the other scenario also is that the virus mutates and it changes itself so that it becomes less disease causing. And if it becomes less disease causing, that's also game over, because if it's less disease causing, a bit like the common cold, we can live with it. So there are several end game scenarios that are all in worth playing for, to be honest.
Dr. Bharat, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to hear you talk. And I think on behalf of all of us and the listeners as well, you've been a wonderful voice of honesty and realism through this. You've never underplayed it. You've never said, oh, it's not as serious as you think it is. But you've always given us the facts. As I said, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So to speak to you, a man of immense knowledge, has always been a great pleasure. And I say that honestly, and I think on behalf of all the listeners that I speak to, Dr. Bharat Pankhania, thank you so much. You're listening to Bob Mills on Talk Radio.
Thank you.
Talk Radio.